I'm Jim Lorimer. I've been the director of the Arnold Classic along with my partner Arnold Schwarzenegger for 35 years. We started the Arnold Classic in 1989 and we've had it here every year, and every year it gets bigger and better. So throughout the 60s, I was chairman of the United States Olympic Committee promoting track and field events at the national level. I was encouraged by the AAU people because they knew that I could run an event to promote weightlifting and bodybuilding. And so in 1967, I ran the National AAU Weightlifting Championships and Bodybuilding Championships here in Columbus, Ohio. And that was reasonably successful. So then they said, would you, if we can get it, run the World Weightlifting Championships here in Columbus, Ohio in 1970? And I said that I would. We had 43 nations in here, but I recognized because you have 7 days of competition, the sport doesn't draw enough. And I said, if we're going to be successful, we must have a bodybuilding competition, because I knew that bodybuilding draws. We had arranged for ABC TV Wide World of Sports to televise the event. So I said, because it's a World Weightlifting Championships, let's call it a Mr. World contest. And they said, okay. So then I proceeded to invite the 6 top bodybuilders in the world. Sergio Olivia was at the top at that time, but there was a young Austrian who had just come into this country. And I called him and found him in the Gold's Gym in California. And I told him quickly what the ABC TV was going to be there. And he said, I'm very interested in being there. I understand the significance of having that TV coverage. I've committed to be in the Mr. Universe contest in London, England. And he said, I do not know how I can meet both obligations. And I said, well, if you will compete Saturday night at the Universe contest, go directly to Heathrow Airport after the competition, get the last flight out to the United States, you'll pick up 5 hours coming across the Atlantic. We will meet you by jet in New York City and bring you to Columbus and you can compete. And he said, if you will do that, I will do it. And that's what he did. And Arnold came in on that weekend and he won the competition. There were 6 men on stage, but they were the 2 outstanding. Everybody was watching Sergio and Arnold. And they started to match shots. And that's the first time there was a pose down. Because and the crowd, 4,000 people there, actually went wild because they were each showing themselves in matching shots the best way that they could. And ever since then, the pose down has been a part, an entertaining part, a presentation part of the sport of bodybuilding. We paid him just $500 for the win that night, but that was as much as they were getting paid at the time. And after the competition was over, he came up to me and he said, this is the best contest I've ever been in. And when I'm done competing in the sport of bodybuilding, I want to go into the promotion of the sport and do everything I can to legitimatize and raise the image of the sport. And I'm going to come back to Columbus, Ohio and ask you to be my partner. And I said, yeah, because I didn't know. But for the next 5 years, he won everything. And then in 1975, the year that they made Pumping Iron, he won his last contest in South Africa. And on the way home from South Africa, he stopped in New York and called me. He said, I'd like to meet with you. And we met at a Holiday Inn downtown Columbus. And at the time, he said, as I told you 5 years ago, I'm now done competing in the sport of bodybuilding. I want to go into the promotion of the sport. He said, but if you'll join with me as partners, you handle the arrangements as you do. I'll handle getting sponsors. I'll handle getting the athletes here. And in 1976, we will run the Mr. Olympia contest, which I've been winning now for 5 years here in Columbus, Ohio. And I said, let's do it. And so we shook hands, and we've had a partnership for 35 years on a handshake. For the first year, Arnold wanted to raise the cash prize immediately up to $10,000, which is 10 times what he'd ever made. And he said in 3 years we're going to be up to $100,000, and all those goals were met. We ran then for some 15 years bodybuilding, running the Olympia a number of times, running the Mr. World contest and the like. And then in 1989, Arnold said, look, we've been running a variety of competitions. Let's have an Arnold Classic. And right from the beginning, where we determined that we were going to try and present the bodybuilding sport in a way that had been never presented. And we were the first ones that actually staged it. Up until the time that we did it here in 1976, people get out on the posing platform and they would pose. But we felt that we should, again, capture both the beauty and the art of what is happening, in addition to presenting the sport in an entertaining fashion. In 1990, Arnold was appointed chairman of the President's Council on Physical Fitness and Sports. That first George Bush. That gave him the opportunity to really send him off politically, because he went to all 50 states at his own expense, meeting with the governors of every state in the United States, talking about the need for physical education in the schools. But it was that experience in the early 90s of working with the President's Council on his trip around the country that led us to start to expand the concept and the presentation of the Arnold Weekend to include other sports than bodybuilding. And that's when we began in 1991, 1992 to invite other sports to be part of the weekend. So the more sports we brought in, the more attractive it became to people who were exhibitors wanting to reach those sports. As a consequence, where the exposition itself took out, the Fitness Expo took out. And now, at the present time, many years later, we have the largest fitness expo we know of anywhere, which is 700 booths. But the reason there are 700 booths and a waiting list is that you have 175,000 fitness fans, 18,000 athletes who are their customers. And there's nowhere else they can go that they get this much exposure and much opportunity to reach the market which is theirs. And so there's just one thing has led to another. Every year we are challenged to bring in new events, new cultures. At the Arnold Sports Festival this weekend, we're going to have 18,000 athletes from 80 nations. The Olympic Games up in Vancouver, for instance, had 6,000 athletes from 70 nations. So it's 3 times as big as far as number of athletes participating as the Olympic Games are. And of course, we're bringing 175,000 people into the weekend for the 4-day weekend. So this year, because we are fully using 5 facilities downtown, we have moved up to Ohio State University. And Ohio State University has the largest athletic complex in the United States. 36 major sports, everything is state-of-the-art, but they have a huge indoor French Fieldhouse track. And this year we're having 1,600 youngsters, 800 girls, 800 boys, participating in the Arnold Track and Field Classic. We're very, very pleased with the fact we're having entries from 80 nations in all these sports this year. They love to be in this environment because they don't get it in environments where there's 175,000 fitness fans mulling around, so the sports come to us. This year I have soccer coming to us, wishing they could be here. I have equestrian events coming to us, wishing they could be here. And so there's and badminton is still another good Olympic sport. In each sport we bring in Olympic level athletes too, particularly in Olympic sports. So these, whether it's gymnastics or whatever, we make sure that the youngsters, the large number of youngsters who are participating, will also see the top level people in the sports, whether it be fencing or whatever. And I'd say the choice of what you do is up to you, what your preference is, but you're going to find very interestingly, and what the beauty of a multi-sport event is, you see something like table tennis, you see something like fencing, you see the skill and beauty of it, it maybe opens up a new competitive opportunity for you. And when you come to Columbus, Ohio for the Arnold Sports Festival weekend, well, you know that that community knows why you're here, and they're welcoming to you, and they're friendly, and they want you to have a great time. It brings into Columbus, Ohio, because we fill 100 hotels in this vicinity. Well, the revenue counts on that is $42.4 million into the community. So it has a huge financial impact on the weekend. We're very uniquely positioned in Columbus in that we have 700 volunteers. In addition to that, 150 doctors and nurses. And if you're going to do something of this scope, have 18,000 young athletes, which you want to protect, it's very, very important that you have the medical presence and support there to do it. And that's one big advantage of Columbus. That's why it stays here. So we again, are just committed to growth. We did not anticipate it was going to get to where it is now, but it has gotten there because of the great support in the community we have.